The thin wires sank into the tender skin of the puppies as they hung on the side of the road, panting hard. The agony of his ragged breath was audible, a small, desperate sound in the vast solitude of the air. Their little bodies trembled helplessly, exhausted by the futile effort to free themselves. The mother dog howled desperately, tugging at the metal with a bloody mouth in the scorching sun. His painful wail rose to the sky, a cry of helplessness and fury that echoed in the desert. She continued to bite the wires with fierce tenacity, not caring about the wounds she inflicted on herself for maternal love. The cars passed by, and no one stopped to help. The indifference of the drivers was one more blow to the poor creature, who watched pleadingly as the world went on. Each vehicle was a broken promise, a testament to the cruelty of not only the act of torture, but of human omission. The truck driver slammed on the brakes firmly, an act of humanity that broke the pattern of negligence of all who had passed. My God! The pungent smell of blood mixed nauseatingly with the suffocating heat of the asphalt. The dog growled, but he didn't run away from his guard post. Despite fear and pain, she stood her ground, protecting her dying young to the end. Behind the thicket, the truck driver saw something that made his stomach turn. But he didn't yet know that this discovery would change his life forever. The magnitude of what I was about to witness transcended any previous experience I had ever had. Fate had put him to a brutal test in the middle of nowhere. The asphalt was burning in the midday sun when Roberto Silva slammed on the brakes of his Scania truck so hard that the tires screeched on the pavement. The rubber complained dramatically upon contact with the hot road, leaving a momentary mark. His heart raced, despite the 22 years on the road, traveling all over Brazil. He had seen it all: horrific accidents, animals run over, people in need of urgent help. His mind was used to processing the tragedy and misfortune of the road. But what was there on the side of the BR-16 about 50 kilometers after Feira de Santana was different, of calculated evil. "What is this?" he muttered, turning off the engine of the heavy machine. Disbelief mingled with anger in his hoarse truck driver's voice. The heavy silence of the interior of Bahia was abruptly interrupted by a sound that froze his blood. A desperate, high-pitched howl echoed through the barren, desolate landscape. It was a primal sound of pain that compelled him to act immediately. Roberto stepped out of the cab, his boots hitting the hot asphalt, and walked toward the noise that didn't leave his head. The smell hit him first, blood mixed with the pungent smell of animal fear. It was a thick, metallic stench that filled the still air. Roberto covered his nose with his shirt but continued walking without hesitation, guided by a moral urgency. About 20 meters from the track, under a dry tree that barely provided shade, the most brutal scene he had ever seen was unfolding. The tree, a symbol of withered life, framed the terrible spectacle of cruelty. 2 Labrador puppies, no more than 2 months old, hung from thin wires tied to low branches. Their little eyes bulged, their tongues sticking out swollen, and their paws struggling in the air in futile effort. Every movement of his tiny legs was a testament to his desperate struggle for life. And there, below them, a skinny and skeletal dog, muddy and with open wounds on her body, jumped. He was desperately trying to reach the puppies, biting the wires until his mouth bled. The mother did not stop, driven by an unbreakable instinct for protection. "Son of a bitch did this?" whispered Roberto, his hands trembling with rage. The dog stopped jumping when she saw him approaching, paralyzed by the human presence. The halt of his frantic movement was sudden, replaced by an instinctive caution. He grunted weakly, more out of desperation and warning than out of real threat. Their ribs were visible through the stretched skin, and their nipples were still swollen from the milk they could no longer give to their young. His extreme thinness betrayed starvation, proof that he had been suffering for a long time. Roberto slowly approached, speaking in a low voice, "Calm down, ma'am, calm down. I'm going to release them from there." The dog took a few steps back, but she didn't leave the puppies for a moment. She stood between the man and his offspring, ready to interpose. The gaze that Jesus Christ directed at him was the gaze of a mother who sees her own children die at the front and can do absolutely nothing to prevent it. The wires were thin but sturdy, the kind used in electric fences. Its fine nature guaranteed a slow and deep cut, maximizing suffering. They had been purposely tied up, calculated to support the weight of pets, but slowly sliced off, a gruesome torture. Roberto felt a lump rise in his throat. Bile rose, a physical reaction to the incomprehensible evil of the act. What kind of monster would do such a thing with helpless beings? He began to try to untie the wire knots, but they were too tight from the tension and heat. His large, strong fingers fought against the cruel and meticulous tie. The cubs were still breathing, though more and more faintly, clinging to a thread of life. One of them, the lightest, already had his eyes half closed, surrendering to agony. Its small body hung inert, about to cross the finish line. "Hold on, little girl, hold on," Roberto murmured, trying not to panic as his hands worked frantically. It was then that he heard a noise behind the thicket, a low sound, like someone moving cautiously through the dry bushes. The previous silence was broken by this subtle disturbance, making his nerves stand on end. Roberto stopped what he was doing and stared in the direction of the sound, suddenly feeling exposed. The dog heard it too, his ears immediately lifted, and she began to tremble even more. Their animal reaction confirmed that the noise was real and posed imminent danger. "Is there anyone there?" shouted Roberto, his voice echoing in the emptiness of the air. Nothing answered him, only the warm wind swaying the dry branches with an unsettling whisper. The stillness enveloped the place again, making Roberto doubt what he had heard. He tried again to free the wires, his hands sweating from the tension and heat. One of the puppies let out a faint whimper, a sound that broke Roberto's heart into 1,000 pieces. It was a cry of pain and a cry for help that I couldn't ignore. "Calm down, son. Dad here will get you out of there," he said in a sweet tone. This was how he would talk to Bidu, his own pet, if he was in trouble at home in Kamakari, waiting for his return from travel. The familiarity of tenderness anchored him to the reality of his rescue mission. The knot of the first puppy finally began to loosen under pressure and patience. Roberto pulled carefully, trying not to hurt the little animal anymore, whose nerves were already at the limit. The wire rope had cut deep into the skin of the puppy's neck, leaving an open, bleeding wound. But at least he was still breathing, a small victory in the midst of the desolation. When she finally managed to pull him out, the puppy fell gently into her arms, warm, but almost without strength. His little heart beat fast like a war drum, signaling his struggle to live. The mother dog came over immediately, sniffing the puppy and licking the wound on its neck with her rough tongue. Then she looked at Roberto with an expression she would never forget in her life. That look conveyed a deep and unusual mixture of gratitude mixed with an ancestral terror. It was the fear of those who had already suffered a lot and who knew that humans could be worse than any wild animal. The second puppy was in worse condition, a much more delicate and critical case. The time of suffering had been too long for his small body. When Roberto managed to free him, the animal barely moved and showed no reaction. His breathing was shallow and erratic, and his glassy eyes indicated a critical condition. "No, it won't die in my hand," Roberto muttered with renewed determination. He began to gently massage the animal's chest, trying to revive it. That's when he heard it again. This time it wasn't a casual noise, but distinctive footsteps. There were footsteps. Footsteps of someone clearly trying to move noiselessly through the bushes. The footsteps came from about 15 meters, getting dangerously close to their position. Roberto slowly stood up, still holding the dying puppy in his arms. He couldn't leave the animal, but he knew danger was imminent and he had to face it. The dog shrank behind him, trembling with a terror he couldn't hide. "I know there's someone there," Roberto shouted, his voice sounding firmer and louder now, with a tone of defiance. He was willing to stand up to anyone, no matter the consequences. "Get out of there and come talk like a man, you coward," he ordered in a booming voice. Silence returned, broken only by the wind and the painful panting of the wounded animals. The air was charged with tension, a tense and dangerous weight. Roberto looked at his cell phone. No signal, of course, there in the middle of nowhere in Bahia, far from everything and everyone. He was alone, him, the tortured animals, and whoever was hiding ominously in the forest. She realized the precariousness of her situation and the loneliness in which she found herself. He put the two cubs on the ground near their mother, who immediately began licking their wounds in desperation. Roberto approached the thicket, his heart pounding in his chest. Adrenaline was running through his veins, preparing him for an inevitable confrontation. If that was the bastard who had done that to the animals, he was going to settle scores right there. He pushed the thorny branches carefully, going a few meters into the dry, thorny vegetation. The heat and bushes made it difficult for him to advance, but anger drove him to continue. And that's when he saw a makeshift tent, made of blue tarpaulin and pieces of wood set up among the dry trees. Outside the store were empty bowls and rusty chains, a sight that turned his stomach. The place looked like a makeshift camp, but with an air of abandonment and sordidness. There were more wires, rolls of barbed wire, stacked up like building material. But it was not that made his legs tremble, but the indescribable smell. A rotten smell, strong and thick, that stuck to his throat, almost making him vomit again. Roberto held his nose, fighting nausea, and walked over to the store. The canvas swayed in the wind, making a dry noise that echoed in the silence like a sinister drum. The uncertainty of what he would find inside added to the terror of the atmosphere. "Is anyone there?" he called, but his voice came out weaker than he wanted, just a whisper. There was no response, only the whistling of the wind. The silence was so heavy that it could be cut with a knife. Roberto took a deep breath and pushed the canvas away from the entrance so he could see inside. What he saw next caused his knees to buckle from the emotional and physical impact. The sight was so horrible that it stripped him of all strength and fortitude. Inside the tent, tied with ropes and wires, were 5 other dogs. All were in deplorable condition, skeletal and visibly injured. The torture had been systematic and prolonged, leaving permanent marks on their bodies. There was a German shepherd with exposed ribs, a small stray dog with a crooked hind leg, and a pit bull with open wounds all over its body. His eyes, Jesus Christ, his eyes were empty, reflecting the horror. They were the eyes of animals that had completely given up on life and all hope. Roberto vomited right there at the entrance of the store, unable to contain his revulsion. His hands were shaking so much that he could barely wipe his sweaty, dirty face. After 22 years on the road, I had seen horrible accidents, people torn to pieces on the asphalt, but never anything that came close to that pure and concentrated evil. "Calm down, guys, calm down," he muttered, slowly entering the tent. His voice, though trembling, was an attempt to offer comfort and security. The smell of feces, urine, blood, and infection was unbearable, suffocating. Some of the dogs didn't even lift their heads when he entered, completely listless. They had lost the will to react to any external stimulus. Others tried to move away from his presence, but the ropes wouldn't let them move. Robert took the knife out of his pocket and began to cut the ropes that were holding them back urgently. Each cut was an act of liberation, a small step toward freedom. The German shepherd was the first to be completely released. When he was free, the animal tried to get up, but his hind legs did not obey him at all. The momentary paralysis revealed a deeper and more severe injury. Roberto then saw that they were broken, poorly healed, and deformed. It seemed as if someone had stomped on their bones on purpose to immobilize them. "What a son of—" he growled between his teeth, rage boiling inside him. The pit bull managed to get up, but could barely stand on its own. One of his ears had been severely severed, and the wound was poorly healed and visibly infected. His gait was wobbly, a sign of his extreme physical weakness. The little stray dog whimpered softly, a pitiful wail. It was as if she was apologizing for the simple fact of being alive in such a deplorable state. Her submission was a clear symptom of the constant mistreatment to which she had been subjected. Roberto cut all the ropes, finally freeing the 5 dogs. They leaned against the walls of the tent, trembling with exhaustion and fear. Their gazes at him were a complex mixture of hope and terror. Hope because perhaps, at last, someone had come to save them from their hell. Terror because, in their experience, only humans had brought them pain and suffering. It was then that Roberto heard a voice clearly behind him, breaking the tense silence. "I wouldn't do it than you," the voice said, freezing the blood in Roberto's veins. Roberto turned slowly, adrenaline paralyzing his body and mind. At the entrance of the store was a tall, thin man, unshaven and with yellow teeth. He was wearing a dirty shirt and an old straw hat, looking unkempt and sinister. In his hands, a hunting rifle was pointed directly at Roberto's chest, ready to shoot. The threat was imminent and lethal, confronting him directly. "You shouldn't have stopped," the man said. Her voice was too calm for the situation, which made it even more chilling. "No one stops here, no one ever stops," he said with a sickly smile. Roberto stood up slowly, raising his hands in surrender, trying to calm the situation. "Listen here, friend. I only saw the animals there." "Are they your pets?" he asked. He was trying to buy time, evaluating his options for escape or fighting. The man let out a dry, humorless laugh. "These are not pets," he said, the contempt in his tone evident. "They are soldiers, warriors. They are preparing for combat." "Prepared for what?" asked Roberto, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear. His heart was pounding so hard that he was sure the madman could hear it rumbling. "To fight, to be strong, to be dignified," the man replied with conviction. The man took a step towards the store without lowering the weapon he was holding. "You don't understand because you're weak, like most people in the city." His tone was one of superiority, as if he possessed a unique and unattainable truth. "You see suffering where there is only strengthening and purification," the torturer explained. Roberto looked at the dogs around him, noticing their pitiful state. The reality of suffering was too obvious to be ignored or misinterpreted. The German Shepherd had fainted again from weakness and shock. The pit bull continued to tremble, leaning against the wall so as not to fall. The little stray dog had closed her eyes, as if waiting for the next inevitable blow. "Strengthening?" Roberto repeated in disbelief, anger beginning to boil in his chest again. "This is torture, you miserable heartless," he shouted with all the air in his lungs. "It's training, it's not torture," the man corrected, as if explaining something obvious to a small child. "Pain makes them grow, suffering makes them evolve to their full potential. These dogs will come out of here stronger than any animal I've ever seen." His belief in this atrocity was absolute and terrifying to Roberto. "And the puppies outside? What strengthening is it to hang 2 defenseless babies?" asked Roberto, defiantly. The man's face closed with an expression of absolute coldness. "The weak die, the strong survive," he said with a twisted and inhuman logic. "It's natural selection at its finest. If they can't get rid of some wires, they don't deserve to live at all." Roberto felt something break inside him, a point of no return in his consciousness. The image of Bidu, her puppy at home, playing in the yard and licking her hand, came to mind. The image of the mother dog outside, desperate, trying to save her children, hit him hard. Also the image of all those tortured dogs inside the makeshift tent. All the evil in the world seemed to have been concentrated in that miserable place. "Are you crazy sick?" said Roberto, his voice trembling from the intense anger he had accumulated. "Crazy? I'm the only sane one in all this," the man replied with a smile that showed his rotten teeth. "The world is full of weaknesses, of people who can't stand any scratches or discomforts. These dogs here will come out different. They will come out prepared for anything." "Ready to die of infection, sick?" replied Roberto, spitting out the truth. The shotgun moved in the man's hands, a lethal reminder of his power. "Be careful with your words, truck driver. It invaded my property and is getting in the way of my work. I can shoot right now and say it was in self-defense," he calmly threatened. Roberto looked around, assessing the situation. The store was in the middle of nowhere, far from any traveled or inhabited roads. No one was going to hear a shot, much less investigate. No one would go looking for him until he reached his destination in 2 days. It would be too late. And yet, who would find that lost place in the interior of Bahia? But then he looked back at the dogs around him, looking for a sign. The German Shepherd had opened his eyes and was staring at him. A look that said simply, "Help me, please do something." The pit bull tried to take a step towards him, but fell to the ground without being able to avoid it. The stray dog whimpered softly, a sound of pure resignation. Roberto thought of Bidu. He thought of the mother dog who must still be licking the puppy's wounds. He thought about all the times he had gone straight through some difficult situation along the way, without stopping. He had told himself that it wasn't his problem, that someone else would take care of it. Count on it in the comments of where you are looking, and take the opportunity to leave your like. He recalled the phrase of the narration, an irony at the time. This time it would be completely different. He made an irreversible decision. "Okay," Roberto said, slowly lowering his hand so as not to scare the man. "He's right, it's my problem, and I accept it." He took a step toward the exit of the store, simulating retreat. The man visibly relaxed a little, loosening his grip on the gun and body. It was then that Roberto turned around and pounced on him, with all the accumulated fury. Roberto threw himself forward with all the strength of his 90 kilograms weight and years of hard work. The man tried to raise the shotgun, but Roberto was faster, reacting on instinct. He grabbed the barrel of the gun and pulled it down just as the shot echoed through the air, thunderous. The pellet hit the floor of the store, kicking up a cloud of dry dirt that filled the air. The dogs were violently startled by the noise, some trying to hide in the corner of the store in terror. The man screamed in surprise and tried to snatch the gun from his hands. But the truck driver was much stronger and driven by a just cause. 22 years hauling heavy loads, changing tires on the road, and manual labor had hardened him like a rock. "Soldier wretch!" Roberto growled contemptuously, twisting the man's wrist until he dropped his shotgun. The gun fell to the ground with a sharp noise, out of range. The man tried to flee, panicked and surprised. But Roberto grabbed him by the shirt and threw him violently against the wall of the makeshift tent. "You're going to pay for this," the man shouted, trying to hit Roberto. The truck driver dodged the blow and landed a powerful right hand in the torturer's stomach. The guy bent over instantly, out of breath, falling to his knees from the impact. Roberto grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and dragged him out of the store, mercilessly. The sun hit his eyes after the darkness of the environment, forcing him to blink. But he did not loosen his grip. The mission of justice was more important than his sight. He threw the man to the ground, near where the dog was still caring for the injured puppies. He wanted the torturer to see the direct result of his sadistic acts. "Look at them!" shouted Roberto, forcing the man's head in the direction of the animals. "Look what you did, you bastard!" he said, forcing him to confront his evil. The dog shrank when she saw her torturer, but she did not flee the scene. He continued to lick the wounds of the puppies, protecting them with his own weak body. One of the little boys was still breathing heavily, his neck purple and swollen where the wire had cut. The image was a mute testimony of excessive cruelty. "They're weak," the man shouted, trying to break free from Roberto's grip. "They don't deserve to live if they don't fight for their existence," he insisted on his sick logic. Roberto felt an anger that he had never felt in his entire life. An anger that came from the depths of his soul, from a place he didn't even know existed. He raised his fist, ready to take down that monster right there, driven by righteous fury. Their primal instinct was violent revenge for the suffering caused. But then he stopped in his tracks, just before delivering the final blow. The weaker puppy had slowly opened its eyes and was looking at him. It was a small look, frightened, but still alive, still with a trace of hope. The mother continued to lick the wounds, even with fear, even wound, even without strength. That's what mothers do, protect their children no matter the cost. They protect, care, love, even when the world seems to be completely against them. Roberto lowered his fist. The decision not to give in to violence was a moral triumph. He was not going to become a monster like that torturer, falling into the same level of baseness. He wasn't going to let anger turn him into the kind of person who hurts others mercilessly. Instead, he took the rope that was on the floor of the tent and tied the man to a nearby tree. He tied it tightly so that he could not let go of his own power. He made sure that the rope did not cut off blood circulation, while maintaining his own morality. Roberto knew the knots of a truck driver. He knew that that rope was not going to come off, even with dynamite. "You're going to stay there until the police arrive," Roberto said, testing the knots once again to ensure their firmness. "The police here?" The man laughed mockingly, despite being tied up and restrained. "Good luck, truck driver. The nearest police station is 60 kilometers away. And they don't come here, no. No one comes here to this forgotten place," he said with a certainty that froze Roberto. Roberto took his cell phone out of his pocket, confirming his suspicion. It still had no signal. The man was right. They were in the middle of nowhere, far from any network coverage. But Roberto had an idea of how to communicate with the outside. He returned to the cab of the Scania truck and turned on the civilian band radio, PX. Every truck driver had a PX radio. It was a mandatory tool on the road to communicate at a distance. He adjusted the frequency carefully and began to call the band's void. Hello, I'm Roberto from Scania Azul, Kamakari license plate. I need urgent help on BR16 KM 847. His voice sounded with a mixture of desperation and urgency. There are injured animals and a madman who is torturing them. Is anyone listening to me, please? He only received pure static and a sepulchral silence on the radio. Roberto tried again, changing the frequency to an emergency channel. Hello, people from the road. This is Roberto Silva. Change. Emergency situation at KM 847. Is anyone listening to me? More static, the silence became unbearable, her despair growing with every second. Roberto began to get seriously desperate because of the lack of communication. The dogs in the store, as well as the puppies, needed urgent and immediate medical attention. And he couldn't abandon the animals to go get help in person. Who guaranteed him that the bound madman would not let go and finish the work of torture? It was then that the radio broke with a clear and familiar voice that miraculously broke the silence. Roberto from Scania Azul. I'm Maria Xenia from the gas station at KM 823. I heard you, my dear. What's going on there? Roberto almost cried with pure relief when he heard that friendly voice. Maria Xenia was known to all the truck drivers who traveled that inhospitable road. She was the owner of a gas station and a coffee shop, and she always helped the needy who passed by. Maria Xenia, for God's sake, listen to me well. I'm at KM 847, leaving the track about 20 meters right side of the road. There's a guy here who was torturing helpless dogs. There are several injured animals that need an urgent veterinarian. Can you call the police for me, please? Pleaded Roberto. Oh my God! Of course I can, my son. I'm already dialing right here in the office. Are you okay? Asked the woman's worried voice. Yes, I am, Maria Xenia, but the animals are very bad. Is there a vet near you? Yes, there is. Dr. Eduardo is here in town. I'll call for him to come right away as well. Wait, Roberto. Help is already on the way. Don't move, said the woman. Roberto turned off the radio and returned to the animals. The dog had managed to get both puppies to suckle a little, despite the injuries. That simple action was a good sign, indicating that they still had the strength to fight for their survival. Inside the store, the other 5 dogs remained in serious condition. The German Shepherd had fainted again, motionless and unconscious. Roberto took out one of the empty bowls outside and went to the truck to get water from the gallon he always carried. Water was the first step in the recovery of dehydrated animals. When he returned, the dog drank desperately in the water, tongue-tapping the bowl as if she hadn't drunk in days. Then he dipped his paw in the bowl and began to clean the puppies' wounds. Roberto observed the scene, impressed by the immense strength of his maternal instinct. "You're a warrior mother, aren't you, ma'am?" muttered Roberto, kneeling next to her respectfully. The dog looked at him, hesitated for a second, and then allowed him to stroke her head carefully. It was the first time she had not shown fear of him or his presence. Roberto looked at the man tied to the tree, whose expression had not changed. He had stopped complaining about the tie, and now only looked at him with pure, implacable hatred. "Why did you do this?" asked Roberto, his voice low but firm. "What pleasure do you get from hurting those who can't defend themselves?" he wanted to know, looking for a rational answer. The man spat on the ground, showing his contempt for Roberto. "You don't understand anything, you never will, because you're weak. I'm going to explain it to you. The world belongs to the strong. It has always been like this," he said coldly. "These animals out there in the wild, the weak die and the strong survive natural selection. I'm just speeding up the process of nature, helping evolution," the madman justified. Roberto shook his head. The disbelief was total. "This is not nature, sick. This is pure and simple cruelty," he said with moral authority. "In nature, mothers protect their young with their lives. In the wild, the herd takes care of the wounded. You, who are the unnatural one here, with your mental illness," he replied with contempt. "Cheap civilization sentimentality," the man laughed. "You'll see, soon the police arrive. They release me and I go back to my work, because they know I'm right." Roberto felt an icy chill at this terrifying possibility. What if the guy was right about the weakness of the laws and the police? What if the police didn't take animal abuse seriously, as they used to do? What if the animals ended up returning to the hands of that sadistic monster? No, that was not going to happen. I was not going to allow it under any circumstances. Roberto looked at the dog, which now slept leaning on the puppies, protecting them even exhausted and injured. He looked at the injured dogs inside the tent and thought of Bidou at home, waiting for his return from the journey. Some battles we have to fight until the end, even if they hurt, even if they change us forever. The decision to fight for them became an unshakable certainty in his heart. The sound of a vehicle's engine echoed through the Sertão before Roberto could see the cloud of dust on the dirt road. There were 2 large and shiny military police vehicles, and a white van with a red cross painted on the side. Maria Xenia, the one at the gas station, had kept her promise and called for all possible help. Roberto stood up and waved to the cars approaching the scene. The dog was startled by the noise of the engines, but he did not abandon the puppies for a second. The police officers stopped near Roberto's truck and got out with their hands on the regulation weapons. "Mr. Roberto Silva?" asked the sergeant, a robust man in his 40s with an authoritative voice. "I am Sergeant Mendez, of the military police of Ferra de Santana. The lady at the gas station said there was a situation here." "Yes, there is, Sergeant." "Please follow me," Roberto said, beginning to walk. He made his way to the tree where he had tied up the sadistic torturer. "This wretch here was torturing the dogs," Roberto reported bluntly. "There's a tent back there with 5 other animals in serious and deplorable condition." The sergeant looked at the bound man, who was now smiling mockingly with impudence. "Untie it immediately," he ordered Roberto with an expression of disapproval. "We will resolve it properly, following the detention protocol," the sergeant said. But the torturer spoke first, before they could obey the order. "Sergeant Mendez, I'm very happy to see you again," said Ismael de Silva, the torturer. "This truck driver assaulted me, invaded my private property, and destroyed my selection work." Roberto felt a shiver. "Again? Do you know each other?" The sergeant sighed, with obvious frustration and weariness. "Unfortunately, yes, Ismael de Silva. We have already had problems with him before in the area." He looked at the bound man in deep disgust. His patience was exhausted. "But never anything that we could prove with solid evidence in the past," the sergeant admitted. "Never, because you don't want to see the truth of my work," shouted Ismael, indignant. "I'm doing important work here, strengthening the animals and preparing them for the survival of the species," he insisted. That's when the vet approached the group, assessing the situation. Dr. Eduardo was a short man in his 50s, with thick-framed glasses and a briefcase in his hand. When he saw the puppies next to the mother dog, his face closed in a grimace of horror. "My God in heaven," he murmured, kneeling beside the little ones. "What did they do to these helpless babies?" he asked, his voice trembling with rage. Roberto told her the whole story of what happened in that place. He told her how he had found the cubs hanging and the mother desperate to save them. He also told him about the store with the other dogs immobilized inside. Dr. Eduardo examined the animals as he listened, his face becoming more and more serious and gloomy. "Dr. Eduardo," said the sergeant as he got up, worried about the doctor's reaction, "I need to bring these animals into my office right away and start treatment. The wounds are infected, they are severely dehydrated, and the smallest puppy has severe pneumonia. If I don't treat them now, they won't make it past tonight," the doctor said urgently. "He can take them." "I authorize it, doctor." The sergeant nodded, acknowledging the emergency. "We are going to need a detailed veterinary report even for the judicial process," Mendez explained. "Legal process?" Ismael laughed out loud at the idea. "Procedure? Why? Animal abuse is a misdemeanor, Sergeant." "I'm paying bail of a few coins and I'm free tomorrow, you know that," the torturer said. Roberto looked at the sergeant, looking for confirmation or denial. "Unfortunately, yes, it's true," the sergeant admitted with resignation. "The law is still very weak for this type of crime," he complained, seeming genuinely angry at the situation. "But this time it's going to be different. I have a plan to stop him," the sergeant said. "Dr. Eduardo, can you prove that there was intentional and premeditated torture?" "Yes, I can prove it. These wounds are not accidental. They are systematic and calculated," said the doctor with certainty. "And there's something more serious," Dr. Eduardo added, looking at the wounds. The veterinarian pointed out the deep wounds in the necks of the defenseless puppies. These cuts were made to cause maximum physical suffering without immediately killing the animal. "This, Sergeant, clearly qualifies as qualified torture," the doctor said. The smile disappeared completely from Ismael's face, understanding the seriousness of the accusation. "You can't prove anything he says," said Ismael, visibly nervous. "Yes, I can, and I'm going to do it," Dr. Eduardo replied without hesitation. The doctor looked at the tent. "Can I examine the other animals inside?" Roberto accompanied the veterinarian inside the improvised tent. When Dr. Eduardo saw the state of the 5 dogs inside, he had to lean against the wall of print. "In 30 years of profession, I have never seen anything like it, of this magnitude and evil," said the doctor with a trembling voice. "Sergeant, please come and see this in here," he called the policeman. The sergeant entered the tent and his face turned completely white, livid with anger. "Son of a bitch," he muttered between his teeth, his rage overflowing. "Doctor, take them away immediately and start treating them." The other policeman also went inside to see and quickly left, unable to bear the view. One of them was vomiting outside the tent, unable to contain the revulsion. Roberto understood the reaction. Even knowing what he was going to find inside, the reality was much worse than any description. "Dr. Eduardo, can these dogs be saved and recovered?" the sergeant asked with genuine concern. "Some can be saved urgently. The German Shepherd is a serious case," the veterinarian explained. "But with surgery on the leg and intensive treatment, he can recover," he said. "The Pit Bull is also an easier case. It has mostly superficial wounds," Dr. Eduardo continued. "He lost part of his right ear, but nothing serious that compromised his life. With the right treatment, you'll be back to normal in a few days or weeks," he said. Dr. Eduardo hesitated before giving the next diagnosis. "Now the little stray dog, the weakest of all." Roberto's heart stopped completely at the pause. "Did he die?" he asked in a choked voice, fearing the worst. "No, but he is fighting very hard," the doctor replied, trying to give hope. "Dr. Carla is with him now, doing emergency blood transfusions. I had severe anemia in addition to severe pneumonia. The next 6 hours will be decisive for his life," the doctor reported. Roberto sat heavily on the floor, overwhelmed by the news. "Can I see them now?" he asked with a lump in his throat. "Yes, you can, but they are still sedated for treatment," Dr. Eduardo replied. The doctor took Roberto to the inpatient room of the office. It was a clean and sterile environment, with several large cages where the animals slowly recovered. The mother dog was in a crate on the floor, with the 2 puppies sucking on his milk with appetite. When he saw Roberto, he immediately raised his head and wagged his weak tail. "Hello, warrior lady," Roberto murmured, kneeling in the front of the recovery cage. "How do you feel now?" he asked fondly, trying to be reassuring. The dog tried to get up to get closer to him, but Dr. Eduardo stopped her. "Calm down, you're still weak, but look at the miracle. You managed to clean the puppies of their wounds. They sucked properly and strongly. She is a true warrior mother," the doctor marveled. Roberto looked at the puppies, who now looked chubby, with their bellies full of nutritious milk. The wounds on his neck had been thoroughly cleaned and bandaged, but they looked like normal, healthy puppies. They were now playful and full of life, a sign of their recovery. The German Shepherd was in a larger cage, with its hind leg in a cast and suspended in the air. He slept soundly due to the anesthesia, but was breathing normally, stable. The Pit Bull was awake and looked at Roberto as he approached his cage. She tried to get up to receive him, but she was still weak from the abuse. "Calm down, warrior," Roberto said, extending his fingers toward the cage grate. The Pit Bull sniffed and licked his hand, a gesture of gratitude. "You'll be fine. I promise you'll be fine." Finally, in the room, in a makeshift incubator, was the stray dog. Dr. Carla, a woman in her 30s with a blonde ponytail, was adjusting medical equipment around the incubator. "How are you, doctor?" asked Roberto with great concern. "He is stabilized for now. The immediate danger has passed," the doctor reported with relief. "The blood transfusion helped a lot. The body temperature is back to normal, which is great. But he lost a lot of blood and is very malnourished, with extreme thinness," the doctor warned. Dr. Carla looked at Roberto. "Dr. Eduardo told me that he wants to adopt all the survivors." "Yes, doctor. Although I know that some will need special care for the rest of their lives," Roberto said with conviction. He looked at the stray dog in the incubator, so small, so fragile, but still breathing and struggling. Mainly for her, my commitment is total, he said. Dr. Carla smiled slightly at his determination. Then you need to know something more about this little animal, the doctor said, pointing to the stray dog. It's not just another abandoned dog. Last night, when Dr. Eduardo called me, I made a few phone calls. This puppy here was stolen 2 months ago from his home. It was stolen from DeSantis family here in Feira de Santana. They filed a police report, spread out posters, and offered a juicy reward for his return. Her real name is Papoka, Popcorn, the doctor revealed. Roberto felt something press in his chest when he heard the news. So he has a family that loves him and looks for him? He murmured in surprise. Yes, it does, and they've been desperately looking for him since the robbery, said Dr. Carla. The doctor moved the equipment from the incubator to make her more comfortable. I have already called them and notified them. They'll come here tomorrow morning very early. Roberto was silent, looking at the puppy with a mixture of feelings. Papoka, even his name had a special meaning, a family bond. A family that loved him, that had searched for him tirelessly, that must have mourned his absence. So it won't need adoption from me, Roberto muttered with a slight sadness. No, but the others will desperately need it, the doctor replied with a smile. And you'll be very lucky to have a father as brave and determined as you, Mr. Silva. Roberto ran his hand over his face, feeling exhausted, emotionally drained from the day. It had been a day that changed absolutely everything he believed in. In the morning, it was just a normal truck driver driving towards Santos. Now he was the savior of 8 tortured dogs and a hero to a family. Dr. Eduardo, Roberto called, looking at his friend. Can I stay here tonight at the recovery office? I want to follow Pipoka's evolution. Of course, there's a couch in my personal office, but try to get some rest, buddy. Tomorrow will be a long day full of emotions, the doctor advised him. Roberto settled into a chair next to Pipoka's incubator. The puppy slept peacefully, but from time to time he opened his little eyes. He looked around, as if he were checking if he was still safe in this unknown place. Hello, Papoka, Roberto whispered in a soft tone. Your family will come to pick you up tomorrow. Did you know that they never stopped looking for you? The puppy wagged its tail slightly, even while sleeping, an involuntary reaction. You're a warrior, you know, Roberto said admiringly. You survived all that horror, and you still managed to trust people. Your family will be very proud of your struggle. Around 3 a.m., Roberto fell asleep soundly in his chair. He woke up to Dr. Carla gently shaking his shoulder. Roberto, wake up, it's time. Papoka is awake and really wants to eat. Roberto opened his eyes and saw the stray dog inside the incubator, her small tail swaying slowly. When she saw Roberto, she began to wag her tail with more strength and joy. Papoka, you're much better, Roberto smiled as he approached the incubator. Dr. Carla offered a syringe with special milk for puppies. Papoka drank it all avidly, with a surprising speed for his condition. Then she licked Roberto's fingers through the incubator rack affectionately. I think you've overcome the imminent danger, Dr. Carla said with great relief. It's a miracle, considering the deplorable state in which he arrived here a few hours ago. Roberto stared at the puppy with a mixture of excitement and pride. Papoka had gone back to bed, but she kept her eyes fixed on Roberto, as if she didn't want to lose sight of him for a second. Papoka, you're going home tomorrow, to your real home, with your real family, with people who love you. But I'm going to miss you, little warrior, Roberto confessed. The puppy closed his eyes, but Roberto was sure that he had understood everything. Somehow, that little animal had understood the meaning of his words. At 8 o'clock in the morning, a family burst into the veterinarian's office. Roberto recognized them even before Dr. Eduardo made the formal introductions. They were Doña Lucha, Mr. Antonio, and his daughter, Beatriz, a girl about 10 years old. The girl's eyes were red and swollen from crying for her pet. He carried a photo of Pipoca on his cell phone, a sign of his unconditional love. "Where is he? Where's my popcorn?" asked Beatriz with a desperate and broken voice. Dr. Eduardo took them to the hospitalization room, the place of truth. As they approached the incubator, Pipoca was awake, struggling to get up. Seeing Beatriz, she began to moan with excitement, her tail crashing rhythmically against the walls of the incubator. "Pipoca! It's you!" shouted Beatriz, putting her hand on the grate. "It's him! It's my popcorn!" the girl shouted, tears streaming down her face. The puppy went crazy with pure joy, starting to bark with excitement. It was a weak and muffled bark, but full of happiness and recognition. He tried to jump up and lick the girl's hand through the protective grating. Doña Lucia burst into tears without being able to contain herself. "My son, my grandson, my little one," she murmured between sobs. The relief was evident. "What did they do to you, little one?" the woman asked with contained anger. Dr. Eduardo explained Pipoca's condition and the care he would still need to recover. Mr. Antonio listened with a clenched fist, anger at the mistreatment stamped on his face. "Who was the bastard who did that?" the man asked, his voice full of menace. Roberto told the full story of how he had found the dogs. He recounted the confrontation with Ismael and the torturer's final imprisonment. Doña Lucia took his hand as she listened, squeezing tightly at each most shocking and brutal detail. "Mr. Roberto," she said when she finished the narration, her eyes full of gratitude, "I don't know how to thank him for what he did. You saved my beloved grandson." "Little grandson?" asked Roberto, surprised by the term. Beatrice smiled through her tears of happiness and relief. "Pipoca is the grandson of my dog Princesa. She died last year, but she left it to me. He is my best friend in the whole world," said the girl with conviction. Roberto felt his chest tighten at the tenderness of the bond. He imagined Beatrice looking for the dog every day in desperation, mourning its absence. He wondered if he was okay, if he was hungry, if he was suffering alone somewhere. "Can I take him in my arms, doctor?" asked Beatrice with a plea in her eyes. Dr. Eduardo hesitated but nodded. "He is still weak, but I think the contact will do him good." Beatrice picked Pipoca up with great care, holding him to her chest. The puppy curled up in her lap, trembling with excitement and relief. He licked her face, neck, and hands with uncontrollable affection. Beatrice cried and laughed at the same time. The relief was palpable. "I knew you were alive. I always knew," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "Mom told me to stop looking, but I knew you were going to come home." Doña Lucia looked at Roberto with eternal gratitude. "Mr. Roberto, I want to pay all the expenses of the treatment, and I want to give you a generous reward as well." "I don't need a reward, Mrs. Lucy. Seeing Pipoca well and safely is reward enough for me. So at least let me pay for the full vet," the woman insisted. Roberto was going to refuse again, but Dr. Eduardo quickly intervened. "Actually, Ms. Lucia, Mr. Roberto will have his own veterinary expenses from now on. He will adopt the other dogs that remain," the doctor explained proudly. Mr. Antonio approached Roberto in surprise. "All of them? All those who survived that massacre?" the man asked, dumbfounded. "Wow, dude! Do you have any idea what you are assuming?" the man warned. "They are traumatized and sick animals. It will be a lot of work, believe me," he insisted. Roberto looked at the mother dog, the one who had saved her puppies on the wires. She was awake, looking at Pipoca on Beatrice's lap, a love scene. He seemed happy to see another dog being loved and protected. "I know, but someone has to take care of them for life, and who better than me?" replied Roberto. Roberto hesitated and corrected himself. "I promised someone." "Promise to whom?" asked Mr. Antonio, looking for a reason. Roberto looked at the mother dog again. "I promised them, everyone." Beatrice approached with Pipoca on her lap of the girl. "Mr. Roberto, Pipoca would like to thank you personally." The puppy stretched its muzzle in Roberto's direction. Roberto reached out slowly, and Pipoca licked his fingers gently. Then he rested his head against the palm of his hand, a gesture of farewell and recognition. It was a moment that Roberto would never forget in his life. The farewell of two warriors who had fought together for life. "Thank you, Popoka," Roberto murmured with a broken voice. "Thank you for never giving up." Dr. Eduardo discharged Popoka to go home, but with a long list of cares. Antibiotics, vitamins, and follow-up visits to ensure your full recovery. Beatrice promised to follow everything to the letter, without skipping anything. "What about the other dogs?" the girl asked worriedly. "The mother dog and puppies need about 3 more days of rest and medication. The German Shepherd and the Pit Bull will need a week of intensive follow-up, but nothing serious that compromises their lives." Roberto thought about the logistics of his small apartment. His apartment in Kamakari was small for so many animals. Rosa, his wife, was going to have a nervous breakdown when she found out about the new tenants. Bidu was going to feel jealous and find it strange to share space with 7 new and traumatized dogs. He thought about the expenses with food, veterinarian, vaccines, and everything that entailed. "Dr. Eduardo, do you know any dog trainers, anyone who works with animals traumatized by abuse?" "Yes, I know him very well. His name is Marcelo Santos, from here in Feira, in fact. He is a specialist in behavioral rehabilitation. I'll give him the contact right away. He's the best in the area." Doña Lucia spoke kindly again. "Mr. Roberto, we live here in Feira de Santana. If you need anything, any help with the dogs, just call. Now you are part of our family, the hero who brought us joy back," she said. "It's true," Mr. Antonio added, giving him a squeeze on the arm. "You brought our grandson back home, safe and sound. You'll always have a plate of food on our table, buddy." Beatrice gave him a kiss on the forehead and then surprised Roberto with a strong, sincere hug. "Thank you for saving my best friend, Mr. Roberto," the girl said fondly. Roberto felt his eyes moisten with emotion. "Thank you for not giving up on him," Roberto replied, moved. The Santos family left with Popoka in a cage. Dr. Eduardo and Roberto stayed in the hospitalization room, checking on the other dogs that remained. The mother dog had managed to get up and was licking the puppies, a sign of improvement. The German Shepherd tried to walk with his leg in a cast, adapting to his new reality. The Pit Bull ate its food with a voracious appetite, recovering its lost strength. "Roberto," Dr. Eduardo said, staring at him, "can I ask you a very deep, personal question?" "Of course, doctor," Roberto replied, nodding. "Why is he doing this? Why does he get into a situation like this, taking on such a gigantic responsibility?" Roberto thought about the question, his mind returning to the scene. It was a question he had been asking himself since the day before. Why hadn't it happened directly as it always did? Why did you get involved in a problem that wasn't yours? Why did you decide to adopt traumatized dogs that were going to give you work for the rest of your life? "You know, doctor, I've been driving the truck for 22 years non-stop on the road. I've seen a lot of bad things on the road, horrible accidents, people who need help, difficult situations on the road. And most of the time I pass directly, without getting involved," Roberto confessed sadly. "It's not my problem," I thought to myself. "Someone else will help. The responsibility is not mine," he had justified. Roberto knelt near the mother dog's cage, feeling a deep connection. She looked at him with those tired eyes, but now trusting in her protector. But yesterday, when I saw this desperate dog trying to save her helpless puppies, I don't know, something clicked. I remembered my own mother, how she fought to protect me and my siblings when my father was drinking uncontrollably. I remember that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves someone to fight for them without expecting anything in return. Dr. Eduardo nodded in understanding at his revelation. "And now, what's going to happen now in your life, Roberto?" "Now I'm going to be that person for them. My purpose is here with them. They're going to have a loving family, they're going to have love, they're going to have unwavering security. They will never go hungry again. They will never be beaten again. They will never again feel abandoned or alone, Roberto promised. Roberto looked at his wristwatch. Time had flown by. It was already past 10 a.m., and I had to call the company to explain the delay. He needed to rearrange the delivery in Santos urgently. Dr. Eduardo, I'm going to sort out some logistical things and I'll be back in the afternoon without fail. Can you take care of them for me until I come back? Asked Roberto. Of course, Roberto. And you're a very lucky man, you should know that. Why do you say that, doctor? Asked Roberto with a curious smile. Dr. Eduardo smiled with genuine joy, because they will repay all this love you give multiplied by 1,000 times. There is no greater gratitude in the world than that of a traumatized dog who finds a true family that loves him. Roberto left the office with a heart full of new certainty. He had 7 dogs waiting for him for a new life, a wife to convince. He had a house to reorganize, and expenses to calculate in detail. But for the first time in a long time, he felt complete and full of purpose. A week later, Roberto was in the backyard of his house in Kamakari. He was setting up the 3rd new kennel he had bought with his savings. Rosa went out and into the kitchen with the face of few friends, banging the pots harder than necessary to make a noise. Bidu watched everything with immense curiosity, sniffing at the new kennel team skeptically. "Roberto Silva!" shouted Rosa from the kitchen door in a loud voice. "Are you completely sure you didn't hit your head on that trip that changed you?" she asked, full of doubts. Roberto stopped screwing the kennel rack and looked at his wife out of the corner of his eye. 15 years of marriage had taught him to recognize Rosa's different shades of irritation. That was the tone of, "I'm angry, but I'll support you anyway, regardless." "Rosa, love, I will be able to handle everything you calm," Roberto assured firmly. "I have already spoken with Marcelo, the behavioral coach. He will come here twice a week to rehabilitate them. And I hired the neighbor's girl to help me with the dogs when I have to travel far." "That's not what I'm worried about at all," Rosa said, moving closer to him, softening her tone. "It's you, my love. Since you came back from this trip, you're completely different." Roberto put the drill aside and looked her in the eye. "Different how, my life? What do you see in me?" he asked. "I don't know, but I see you lighter, as if you had a very big weight off your shoulders," his wife explained. Rosa sat down on the plastic chair in the backyard with a smile. "I haven't seen you like this, so happy and calm, in whole years," he admitted. Roberto thought about what she had said. It was completely true. Ever since he saved the dogs, he felt an inner peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if he had finally done something important with his life. Something that really mattered to the world, beyond the cargo it carried. "Maybe it's because I finally stopped pretending that other people's problems aren't my personal problem," he admitted aloud. Roberto's cell phone rang with a vibration. It was Dr. Eduardo calling again. "Roberto, I have good news," said the doctor's cheerful voice. "The last exams are already ready and all of them are cleared to go home." "What time can you come pick them all up?" the vet asked. Roberto looked out over the backyard, a transformed space. He had 3 kennels set up, enough food for a month, toys, and warm blankets. Everything was ready to receive them in their new home. "Can I go right now, doctor? I'm on my way," he said urgently. An hour later, Roberto was back at the Feira de Santana office. The dogs were visibly improved and more lively. The mother dog, whom he had decided to call Warrior was standing, wagging his tail when he saw him enter. The puppies, now baptized as Courage, and Hope, played with each other with joy. They were full of regained and renewed energy. The German Shepherd, who was now called Titan, limped slightly, but could walk and move. The Pit Bull, now called Corazon, had gained considerable weight and his eyes shone with life again. And there was one more surprise for Roberto in that place. "Roberto," said Dr. Eduardo, taking him by the arm, "I want to introduce you to someone else who is coming with you." In the back cage was a dog Roberto didn't know, an adult golden Labrador. She looked at him curiously, but also with a great sadness in her eyes. "Who is this friend?" asked Roberto. "That's Thor Asterix," Dr. Eduardo replied. "He arrived here yesterday brought by the police. They found him on Ismail's property, in a cage hidden at the bottom of the earth." Dr. Eduardo opened the cage and Thor came out slowly, cautiously. He had been there longer than the others, much longer, alone and suffering. Roberto knelt in front of Thor, waiting for a reaction. The Labrador approached cautiously, sniffing the atmosphere with fear. But when Roberto reached out, he smelled it and finally allowed himself to be gently stroked. "Was he alone in that miserable cage?" asked Roberto, his voice full of pity. "I was." And Roberto, when the police found him, had a chain around his neck, the doctor revealed. A thick chain weighing 15 kilograms, the doctor specified. Roberto felt the familiar anger rise again in his chest at the atrocity. 15 kilogram? He asked incredulously, his voice trembling with rage. Ismail forced him to wear that chain all day without rest, without stopping suffering. He said it was to strengthen Thor's atrophied neck and back muscles for fighting, the doctor explained. He's going to need a lot of physical therapy to regain his body's mobility. Roberto looked into Thor's eyes. A silent connection was established between them. They were sad, pain-filled eyes, but there was still life there, a small spark. There was still hope for the future and life. "Doctor, I can imagine what you're going to ask me," Roberto said with a sad smile. "Yes, you can adopt it too, of course you can," Dr. Eduardo replied with a smile. "But now it's 8 dogs in total, Roberto. Are you completely sure of your decision?" Roberto looked around the room, observing all the animals he had saved. Warrior with her puppies, courage and hope. Titan with his leg in a cast and his dignity restored. Heart wagging its tail with joy for its upcoming outing. And now Thor, who had suffered alone for so long. "I'm sure, Doctor. My heart tells me I have room for Thor in my life and in my heart." The transport to Kamakari was a truly unusual adventure. Roberto had rented a special van, and Dr. Eduardo went with him to make sure everyone arrived safely. The dogs were eager for freedom and change. Some were crying in fear. Others wagged their tails non-stop, and some got dizzy along the way. When they got home, Rosa was at the door with Bidou on her lap, waiting for the new family. Neighbors had gathered to watch the arrival of the famous dogs. The story had appeared in the local newspaper in the area. "Rosa," Roberto said, getting out of the truck, "I want you to meet our new and large family that we are going to form." Guerrera came out first, sniffing the new air cautiously. When he saw Rosa, he slowly walked over and rested his head on her leg. Rosa immediately knelt down and stroked the dog's head gently. "Hello, beautiful, welcome home to your new safe home," Rosa murmured fondly. The puppies ran out and began to explore the backyard curiously. Bidou got off Rosa's lap and went to investigate the new arrivals. He sniffed each one with immense curiosity, wagged his tail, and Roberto knew that it was going to work perfectly. Titan had difficulty getting out of the truck due to his leg in a cast. But when he stepped on the grass in the backyard, he lay down and rolled over with relief. It was as if I was feeling freedom for the first time in a long time. Heart went straight to the toys that Roberto had strategically scattered in the backyard. He grabbed a tennis ball and began to play alone, joy trampling on his face. Thor was the last one out of the van, the most cautious of them all. When he entered the courtyard, he stopped and looked around, assessing the environment. Roberto knelt beside him and spoke in a soft voice. "This is your home now, Thor. No one will hurt you again." Thor looked at Roberto, then at Rosa, and finally at the other dogs playing happily. Slowly, very slowly, it began to wag its long tail. Dr. Eduardo spent another hour checking to see if everyone was adjusting well to the new home. When he left a detailed list of instructions and promised to return the following week for a general overhaul. At night, Roberto was sitting in the backyard watching his new big family. Guerrera slept peacefully in the corner with Courage, and Hope curled up with her. Titan lay near the door, still alert, like a silent guardian. Corazon played softly with Bidou, accepting the leader of the pack. Thor had lain down near Roberto, his head resting on his leg. Rosa brought 2 cold beers and sat next to her husband, looking at the starry sky. "Do you know what I'm thinking, Roberto?" his wife asked, taking a drink. "What, my love? Tell me," Roberto replied. "That our house has never been so full of life and joy," Rosa said, looking at the sleeping dogs. "They are happy now, and you are too. I can see it in your eyes," he said. Roberto stroked Thor's head fondly. "They deserve the chance to live, and you deserve to be proud of something really great that you did in life." Roberto looked at his wife, seeking her understanding. "What do you mean by that, Rosa?" he asked. "You're a good man, Roberto. You always were, ever since I met you." "But I don't think you've ever done anything that really touched your soul," Rosa told her honestly. "Something that would show who you really are in your deepest essence," he insisted. Roberto thought about it, and Rosa was absolutely right. He had always been a normal, hard-working, honest guy, but without great feats. He had never done anything that made him feel special or a hero. "Now you know, and I know it," Rosa continued sweetly. "You're the kind of person who stops along the way to save those in need. The kind of person who takes on responsibilities that no one else wants to take for themselves. The kind of person who turns someone else's tragedy into a family of their own, a safe home." Thor raised his head and looked Roberto in the eye. His eyes were no longer sad or empty, but filled with gratitude. For the first time since Roberto met him, Thor seemed to be at peace. "Thank you, love," Roberto said, holding Rosa's hand tightly. "Why are you thanking me?" she asked, smiling. "To understand everything, for accepting them, and for accepting me in this new life," Roberto responded. Rosa smiled, her affection deep. 15 years married to you, Roberto Silva. I thought I saw it all in you. But this was the best surprise you've ever given me in our entire life together." That night, for the first time in a long time, Roberto slept without any worries in his chest. In the backyard, 8 dogs slept safely and warmly, dreaming of a fearless future. And in Roberto's heart there was an unshakable certainty he had finally found his purpose in life. 6 months later, Roberto was driving again on the same BR-16. The place where it had all begun months ago, the turning point of his life. But this time he wasn't alone in the cab of the truck. Thor was beside him, in the passenger seat, looking out the window with puppy curiosity. Roberto had obtained special permission to take emotional support animals on his long-distance trips. Thor had officially become his companion on the road and in life. "Look over there, Thor," Roberto said, pointing to a sign on the road. "Feira de Santana, 50 kilometers. We are going to visit Dr. Eduardo for a general checkup." Thor wagged his tail with joy and barked once, happy with the adventure. In those 6 months, the Golden Labrador had completely transformed his body and spirit. His neck muscles had developed with intensive physiotherapy. His fur shone, his eyes radiated happiness and inner peace. But most of all, he had learned to trust humans and goodness again. Roberto's mobile phone vibrated with an incoming call. It was Rosa. "Hello, love. How's the journey going with Thor?" he asked. "Don't worry. Thor is really enjoying knowing the road," Roberto replied with a smile. "So how are the other animals at home?" her husband asked. Roberto heard the sound of dogs barking happily in the background of the call. Rosa laughed fondly. "Courage and hope destroyed another shoe of yours, the one you left at the entrance." Guerrera continues to protect everyone. She is the matriarch of the pack. Titan has learned a new trick. He sits down and kicks his paw with his cast. Heart is still Heart. He ate Bidu's food again, the glutton of the house. Roberto smiled. Each of the dogs had developed a unique and irreplaceable personality. Courage was adventurous, always exploring new corners of the yard. Esperanza was affectionate. She lived close to Rosa at all times. Guerrera continued to be the matriarch leader, taking care of all her adopted children. Titan, despite his injured leg, had become the official guardian of the house. Corazon was pure joy. She turned any moment into a fun game. And Bidu, the first dog, had become the proud leader of the pack, accepted by all. "Hey, Roberto," Rosa continued in a different voice. "One more thing you have to know along the way." "Tell me, love, what happened now in the house?" asked Roberto. "I am sending you today a letter from Beatriz, Pipoca's girl, so that you can read it calmly." "What did the little girl write?" asked Roberto, moved by the memory. "Wait, I'll read it aloud to you so you can hear it." "Uncle Roberto, Pipoca is too well. He grew a lot and became the smartest and most handsome dog on the street. My mother said I can write to you to tell you that she never forgot you, nor will she. When someone says your name in the house, he gets excited and runs to get you. Thank you for saving my best friend, your friend forever, Beatriz." Roberto felt his chest tighten with pure emotion. "Give her a big hug when you call her," she said with a hoarse voice from contained emotion. "I will, don't worry. And, Roberto, there's one more important thing." "Tell me once and for all, Rosa, you have me in suspense," Roberto asked. "A couple came here today to the house. They saw the report about you on TV and want to adopt a rescue dog. They said they were deeply inspired by your incredible story of kindness." Roberto frowned in surprise. "Report? What report are you talking about?" "Haven't you seen it on the news? It came out yesterday on the Jornal Nacional, the most important newscast," Rosa explained. "They talked about the work you are doing with Marcelo, rehabilitating traumatized dogs. They called you the dog trucker on the news." Roberto almost chokes on his saliva, incredulous. "Jornal Nacional? Rosa, I didn't give any interviews, I swear to you." "It was Dr. Eduardo who gave it, in great detail. He told your whole story, showed the dogs before and after the rescue." "Roberto, you became famous throughout Brazil," his wife said. Thor looked at Roberto, sensing his unusual agitation. Roberto stopped the truck on the side of the road. Ironically, it was very close to the spot where he had found the dogs 6 months earlier. "Rosa, I don't want to be famous. I just wanted to take care of our animals in peace and silence." "Too late, my love. Your phone hasn't stopped ringing all night. They are people who want to adopt dogs, people who offer donations of money and food. Even a dog food company wants to partner with you for a campaign." Roberto turned off his cell phone, overwhelmed by so much unwanted attention. He stared out the window of the truck. It was strange to think that that lonely road, that exact spot on the road, had completely and irreversibly changed his life. If I had passed by just that day, everything would be different, right, Thor? "We just wanted a quiet life, didn't we, mate?" he asked his dog. Thor put his front paw on Robert's arm and looked him in the eye tenderly. It was as if he was silently saying, "You changed my life. Now is the time to change the lives of many other animals." Roberto turned his cell phone back on, resigned to his fate. He had 47 missed calls from unknown and known numbers. The first number he called was Dr. Eduardo's. "Roberto! Did you see the report that came out on the news?" the doctor asked, excited. "Rosa told me now, doctor, but it was not necessary to do that. My life is exposed." "Necessary, yes, Roberto. Your story of kindness needs to be told across the country." "You can't imagine how many people called me today," the doctor said, overwhelmed by the success. People who want to help, who want to adopt, who want to make a difference in the world. Dr. Eduardo paused emotionally. Roberto, with your simple act of kindness, you inspired the whole country, said the doctor. I just did what any decent person would do in my place, Roberto defended himself, minimizing his action. No, Roberto, that's exactly the problem we face, the doctor said sadly. Most people wouldn't. Most would go straight through, like you've been through difficult situations yourself for years. Your story shows that we can change, that it's never too late to start making a difference in the world. Roberto was silent, processing the depth of the veterinarian's words and his new role. Doctor, I have one more question for you. And Ismael? What happened to the sadistic torturer? He wanted to know. Wow, that's a good question. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for qualified mistreatment without bail. It is the first conviction of this type in Bahia, a legal precedent, a victory for animals. The process has become jurisprudence, a milestone for the law, Dr. Eduardo reported. Dr. Eduardo took a deep breath, holding back his emotion. But Roberto, there's something else you need to know, and it's very important for the case. The police discovered that Ismael was not alone. He had accomplices in other states. Roberto felt a chill. How is that, doctor? There was a network of torturers, other people in other states, doing exactly the same thing he did in his makeshift tent. Your testimony and your courage helped to dismantle everything completely, Roberto. They saved more than 100 dogs from being tortured and killed at their hands. Roberto rested his head on the steering wheel of the truck, feeling the weight of the revelation. Thor put his head in his lap, feeling that Roberto needed his unconditional support. 100 dogs saved, doctor. There are 100 dogs that are alive today thanks to me, he murmured, incredulous. Why did you stop on that lonely road? Why did you decide to get involved? He asked. Why didn't you pass by, as you always did without fail? His own conscience wanted to know. Roberto hung up the phone and stood there, with Thor on his lap, trying to process everything he had just heard. A single decision to step on the brakes, had saved 100 animals, inspired an entire country, and changed their lives forever. When he arrived at Feira de Santana, Dr. Eduardo was waiting for him, with more news and a new challenge. The vet's office had become a busy makeshift adoption center. There were people queuing to meet the rescued dogs, full of hope. Roberto, I want to introduce you to someone else, Dr. Eduardo said, taking him to the emergency room for hospitalization. In a cage on the corner was a stray dog, clearly pregnant, with frightened and trembling eyes. Next to the cage, a plaque that read, Nox Luna Ostrix, rescued from dogfights, pregnant, needs special attention and a home. It arrived yesterday, explained Dr. Eduardo. Police dismantled a dogfight in Salvador and rescued her from there. Luna here was used to raise puppies for illegal fighting. She is a very mistreated and scared dog. Roberto knelt in front of the cage tenderly. Luna cowered in fear at the bottom of the cage, trembling from human contact. But when Thor approached the cage and wept softly, Luna raised her head to see him. It was as if Thor was telling him, this human right here is different, you can trust him fully. How many puppies are you going to have, doctor? Asked Roberto in a soft voice. 5 or 6, according to my calculations and the x-rays. They will be born next week urgently, the doctor replied. Roberto looked at Dr. Eduardo, feeling the weight of the new responsibility. What if no one adopts them after birth? He asked, knowing the answer. Roberto, you already have 8 dogs at home. Your wife will kill you if you carry one more, the doctor joked. Roberto looked at Luna again, pregnant, scared, without a safe place to go in the world. She thought of Warrior, of how she had protected courage and hope even wounded and weak. She thought of all the mothers who fight for their children, even when the world is completely against them. Doctor, give me Rosa's phone number right now, Roberto ordered determinedly. Doctor, Eduardo shook his head, but reluctantly handed him the phone. "Rosa, it's me again. I know I just called just now. Rosa, can I ask you a question? Do you fully trust me and my judgment?" "I know. 8 dogs is already total madness," Roberto hurriedly said. "But what if there were 15 more dogs in the house?" he asked, his voice low and trembling. The silence on the other end of the line lasted forever. "Roberto Silva," Rosa finally spoke, her tone unusual, a mixture of exasperation and affection. "Are you seriously asking me to bring 6 more dogs into this house?" "7, in fact, Doctor. Luna is also a rescued dog," Roberto corrected the doctor. Another silence, even longer and more tense. "They have nowhere to go, do they, Roberto?" asked Rosa, understanding her moral dilemma. "No, they don't. It would be a disaster," Roberto replied sincerely. "And you can't pretend that you didn't see them, that you don't know what happened, because that's not possible for you." "No, I can't ignore it or pretend not to know the truth," Roberto admitted. Rosa sighed deeply. "So we're going to need a much bigger backyard, my love. Tomorrow we will call the bricklayer." His wife receded. Roberto smiled from ear to ear. The relief was total. "I love you, Rosa Silva. You are the best woman in the world, my partner." "I love you too, Roberto, but the next time you bring a dog home without warning, I'll kill you for real," he threatened affectionately. "Thank you for coming here, but don't leave yet. On the screen next to it is another exciting story that you can see. Click subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. I'll wait for you there on the road," a voice said in the audio, a final message of the narration. When Roberto hung up the phone, Dr. Eduardo was smiling. "Do you know what you are, Roberto?" the doctor asked. "A madman, a hero," he replied to himself. "A hero who doesn't know he's a hero, who doesn't recognize his own goodness," he said. Roberto looked at Luna, who was now a little more relaxed with Thor next to the cage, giving him support. He looked at Thor, who had arrived there broken and afraid, and now radiated peace and hope. He thought of the other 7 dogs at home, each with their own story of pain transformed into unconditional love. "I'm not a hero, Doctor," Roberto said humbly. "I'm just a guy who learned that stopping to help is worth a lot more than getting to a final destination on time. My burden isn't as important as life." That night, driving back home with Thor by his side, Luna was pregnant in the body of the truck, in a comfortable box that Dr. Eduardo had prepared with love. Roberto thought about how strange and beautiful life is. Destiny. 6 months earlier, it was just Roberto Silva, a truck driver from Kamakari, nothing more. Today he was the truck driver of the dogs, a national inspiration, future father of 15 rescued dogs, and the only thing that had changed was a decision, a single decision not to go ahead on the road, but to stop to help. When he got home, Rosa was at the door with the other 8 dogs waiting for him, a noisy welcome. Everyone wagged their tails as if they knew the family was going to grow again that same night. "Welcome home, Luna," Rosa said, helping to carry Luna inside with care and tenderness. Roberto looked around his backyard that was now going to have to be urgently expanded. Their simple house, which was now a safe haven for animals. Her normal, routine life, which was now extraordinarily special. And all because one day, on a deserted road, he decided that the problems of others were also his own problems, that he could not be indifferent to cruelty. While Luna settled into her new home, surrounded by 8 curious dogs, but respectful of their state, Roberto knew that he had found his true place in the world, his purpose. He was no longer just a truck driver, he was a savior, he was a family, he was proof that one person can make a difference. And that sometimes the most important destination is not where you are going on the map, but where you choose to stop on the path of life. The end of an adventure and the beginning of a big family. In